I'd now like to welcome to the microphone Dr. Melissa McConaghy, who is the founder. I was going to say co-founder for some reason. No, she is the exclusive founder of PD Warrior and here to speak to you about the importance of exercise.
Thanks, Olivia. Thank you, Parkinson's Australia, for having me. As the only exercise presentation of the conference, I'm either going to assume that I'm preaching to the converted or I'm going to have to do a lot of justice to exercise itself. So what I'm going to be talking about today, eventually, thank you, is the science of exercise. And as a disclosure, I have founded PD Warrior, but I'm not talking about that too much today. I'd like to give you a bit more background around exercise itself. So as we know, exercise has been shown to be useful and positive for helping people with Parkinson's, and we're talking specifically around physical activity and scheduled exercise. Other things there that I just wanted to highlight, if you can see in green there, also coffee, which is fantastic, although I do need to follow up with Laurie Mishley. For anybody that was at her session at lunchtime, she was saying that was not a good thing, so I'm a bit devastated. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what happens as you age. And there was some conversations earlier today around GLP-1 and the impact of a lot of people taking those GLP-1 agonists and whether that leads to sarcopenia over time, which is decreased muscle activity as you age. That can generally be a risk factor for falls as well. And we're going to talk specifically around the role of exercise and how you can get the biggest bang for your buck with your exercise program. All right. So it's unequivocal. We know that exercise is very beneficial for everybody, regardless of whether you have Parkinson's or not. So everybody needs to be exercising every day. That is what our bodies are designed to do. It's just that modern life tends to get in the way and we tend to be sedentary quite a lot of the day. We sit, hence we are all sitting here at the moment. And that's really leading to a lot of problems with our physical health, cardiovascular, metabolic conditions, etc. Also weakness. And if you've got a comorbidity or a condition like Parkinson's, that will lead to falls as well. But we know that general exercise will have significant benefits, and you can see the whole list there. So it can promote gut and brain health, it can improve cerebrovascular health, reduce stress, which is what we've talked about in Cedric's presentation as well. It can enhance mitochondrial function, and those mitochondria are your absolute powerhouses for energy. So if we exercise, we can increase through biogenesis, we can increase both the mitochondria and also their function as well. We can reduce mood changes, depression and apathy just with general exercise and physical activity. And we can also have improvements in cognitive fitness, so how fast you process information, memory and things like that. Oh, I can see here that I've got an older set of slides. So what I also wanted to just point out here with an illustration is that example on the right-hand side there. You'll see here, this is a bit of a cartoon example, but it just shows you what could happen. Frailty and lack of strength is not inevitable as you age, and it's not inevitable with your Parkinson's either. So if you look at the bottom graph there, you can see a 40-year-old triathlete. If we took a cross-section through the thigh, that's where you'd see the grey area there is the muscle, and you've got the bone sitting right in the middle there. And there's a lot of muscle bulk there, and you could see that and you would expect that in someone who's fit and active, like a triathlete in their 40s. You can see in the second, image there, a 74-year-old who's become quite sedentary. And what you can see around the grey muscle bulk is quite a lot of white opacity, and that's the fatty tissue. And you can see that that's infiltrated into the muscle. And that's really common with what happens with people as they become much, much more sedentary. They get weaker, they have significantly less muscle bulk, and then they have fatty infiltrate into that. So ability to increase your power to get on and off a chair swiftly and effectively can be significantly reduced. Getting in and out of the car, off a low sofa, things like that can be really impacted if you don't have sufficient muscle bulk and you can't recruit those muscle fibres quickly enough. And that's very common in sedentary muscles. So a 74-year-old sedentary man as an example. Now, for illustrative purposes, what I've shown you here is what might happen if you are physically active. You might be doing a progressive resistance training program. You can see in the bottom graph there, or illustration, is somebody who's 74 or 70, 74 as well, but you can see significant muscle mass. And so what we're saying here is it's not a factor of age, it is a factor of your physical activity level. So the take-home message is You must keep yourself physically active. And what I'll go through now is to tell you a little bit more around how you can get the biggest bang for your buck with the exercise that you do. All right, so unfortunately at diagnosis, the data tells us that people with Parkinson's are already moving 30% less than healthy age-matched controls. So that means that not only are people moving less, when they are moving, they're actually doing, their walks are significantly shorter, and the speed that they're walking at is also significantly slower. And so physical activity overall has declined, and that really hasn't changed that much over the last decade that people have been looking at this observational analysis. So we need to keep people moving, and we also then need to look at how we refine that for each individual and what their goals might actually be around. The other thing that we need to understand with physical activity is there's a lot of decline in function that can be attributed to sedentary behaviour, or to Parkinson's itself, but that doesn't account for everything with respect to disability and Parkinson's. There's a variance there that cannot be explained for, except for the role of sedentary behaviour patterns. So independent of the disease, independent of Parkinson's, if you are sedentary, that is likely to exacerbate your symptoms and increase your or decrease your levels of function. So it's really important that you do keep yourself moving. Just looking at some of the data here on a Cochrane review, this was published in 2023, just looking at the role of exercise interventions, and they can be really broad. So there's some exponential literature available now on the role of exercise, and we can see here on the left that you might be looking at dance, aqua, gait, balance and function. These all increase clinician-rated impairment and disability, so there's a positive effect from doing these exercise interventions. And really importantly, what you can see here on the right-hand side, a positive effect on quality of life from doing specific exercise programs. And you can see here we've got aqua, endurance, mind, body, skip down to strength resistance. So there's a broad range of activities that you could be doing to improve the way that you function that will have effects on your quality of life. Just looking at some more of the exercise evidence here, we can see, particularly in graph B over here, is looking at what kind of interventions are better than the control. And this was a randomised control trial and meta-analysis that looked at about 3,500 people, and they were able to surmise that activities like balance and gait training with cues or with dual tasking were significantly beneficial than the control group who were not doing these exercises. Also bodyweight support treadmill training, which I'll show you some examples of shortly, which is relatively accessible and can have very, very significant and positive effects on gait and your ability to walk and mobilise. And then we're going to talk a little bit about power training and resistance training, because there's some really nice emerging evidence looking at this as well. And I just wanted to touch on cognition. So we heard this morning that the rates of cognitive decline in Parkinson's are fairly significant. By around 20 years, we understand that about 80% of people will have achieved stages of dementia with Parkinson's. And that's pretty scary, very catastrophic, and often what I talk to patients about in the clinical setting. That's why data like this is so very important. So Jones and et al. Looked at what happened in the Parkinson's progression markers intervention initiative, PPMI, in about 307 people, and they looked at physical activity measures over a period of 3 years on a self-reported scale, and they were able to show that those that decreased their activity over 3 years had a significant increase in cognitive decline. So the less mobile and active you are, the more likely to have cognitive deficits. Okay, and you can see here in this data here, cognitively normal is in the blue, mild cognitive impairment is orange, and in the grey you've got Parkinson's disease dementia. For the people that declined in their overall self-reported activity levels, they had a significant increase in their cognitive decline. Positively, though, you could see those that increased their physical activity levels, you saw lower levels of mild cognitive impairment and Parkinson's disease dementia. So takeaway message again is increase your overall physical activity levels and then try and get the biggest bang for your buck that you can. Some of the other evidence that we're looking at here, this was a study published last year by Mitchell and colleagues looking at, I guess, the pyramid hierarchy of what kind of exercise could be most beneficial for individuals. And so I'm going to spend a bit of time going through some of this data and literature, and hopefully what you can take away from this is what is going to be most effective and beneficial for you. And really, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to what do you enjoy doing the most? Because if you don't enjoy it, it's going to become a chore and it'll be much harder for you to be consistent with what you're doing. So the first thing you need to do is find what you enjoy and then build a network of buddies, spouse, daughter, friend, colleague, whoever it might be that can keep you accountable and help to make it much, much more enjoyable for you, because consistency is the key. So you can see here in this hierarchy, we'll talk about aerobic exercise, then we'll talk around the role of resistance training, and then neuromotor, which is skill acquisition training, which is what my passion area is for Parkinson's. Okay, so if we look at aerobic exercise, this was a study that was published last year, and this was fairly groundbreaking at the time. It was a proof of concept study, but it was conducted over a 6-month intervention period, and what they were looking at was what was the effect of an intensive exercise program on 2 key markers in the brain. And they were specifically looking at dopamine transporter system in the brain and also the neuromelanin. And what they found was the intensive intervention group, the group that did intensive exercise over that 6-month block, they were able to show that their dopamine transporter system improved significantly, which means they were able to mobilise and effectively utilise the endogenous dopamine they had. So their naturally produced dopamine was utilised much more effectively in the intervention group. The other thing they were looking at was the marker of neuromelanin. And neuromelanin is an indicator of neuronal health, and they were able to show with the intensive exercise that there was significantly more neuromelanin in those dopamine-producing cells, which is also fantastic. Key to this is that it was done in humans, so this is not an animal study. So this was showing significant impact of exercise, intensive exercise, showing neuroprotection. So really, really powerful, fairly groundbreaking when this was produced last year. Another study I just wanted to touch on was this one, where they also did an intensive exercise, aerobic exercise program, and what they were specifically looking at was what happened to the connectivity within the brain for those that were doing the intensive exercise program versus what happened to the control group who were listening to education series, etc. And what they were able to show with the intervention was that there was an increase in connectivity between specific parts of the brain, and they showed that this had an influence, a positive influence on cognition and brain integrity. And also they were able to show that there was a significant reduction in brain atrophy, which is really common in Parkinson's, particularly as people start to decline in cognitive function, sedentary behaviours, etc. You start to see brain volume degradation and atrophy. They were able to mitigate against that in this intensive exercise study. So 2 key factors off the back of the intensive exercise program. Now, in terms of the strength training program, which was the second from the bottom in that hierarchy, what we're looking here at is at a randomised control trial here where they had a progressive resistance training program. So this is typically done in a gym-based environment. This was done over 9 weeks, and people were doing twice a week progressive resistance training, and they contrasted that to a control group over here. And with the twice weekly progressive resistance training program, they were able to show significant improvements in timed up and go, which is a clinical measure that we often use to see how quickly can somebody stand up, walk 3 metres, turn around, come back, turn around again and sit down. So there's a lot of balance and gait and mobility measures that we would look at doing that. How quickly or how many times could somebody stand up and sit down in 30 seconds? And the bradykinesia score on the UPDRS. All of these clinically improved in contrast to the control with twice a week progressive resistance training. Now, key to this is balance and strength correlate really highly. So if you're worried about falls or you've had some recent near misses, strength training probably needs to be on your docket. You need to be incorporating progressive resistance training, or at the very least functional strength training, into your program to mitigate against falls risk. One of the other studies that we looked at here, this was published just this year, was looking at velocity-based training, which is much more of a modern progressive resistance training program, looking at using velocity metrics and velocity trackers. It's typically done on athletes in high-performance gyms, but they were looking very specifically at what happened if they did velocity-based training 3 times a week versus twice a week. And in the twice a week and the 3 days a week, they were able to show an increase in cross-sectional areas, the amount of muscle fibre mass that each individual was able to increase. They also showed increases in walking mobility and also muscle strength, but in the 3 times a week group, they were also able to show increases in maximal walking speed, which they didn't see that in the twice a week group. So again, it just begs the question around dosage. If you've got time in your week to fit these programs in, 3 times a week might be better than twice a week for progressive resistance training or velocity-based strength training. All right, now I want to touch on the neuromotor, which was the third one from the bottom in that hierarchy of exercise. And this is around skill acquisition training, functional strength training, learning to do whole body movements better, activities of daily living better. And this was a study conducted by Claire Toussac and colleagues over in WA, and they were able to show that at the end of the 10-week challenge, which is the signature PD Warrior program, people were moving significantly better in their overall mobility, their walking speed, as well as their emotional well-being at the end of the 10-week study. Now, that's what you'd expect because it's a 10-week intensive exercise program based specifically on how you can learn to move better with your Parkinson's. And it comes very much down to tailoring to each individual. Are you more bradykinesic? Are you more tremor dominant in your presentation, or are you having falls and near misses and freezing of gait? The program would be very tailored to the individual. So as you'd expect, people did improve, and that's what we can see here. There was a clinically significant improvement in people's overall mobility throughout the 10-week challenge. Just wanted to show you some examples of gait training and how we might do this clinically, because we know in Parkinson's, particularly if you feel that slowness and smallness in your gait, for instance, is one of the characteristics of your Parkinson's, what we will often do is treadmill training because the literature is very, very strong on how we can improve your overall gait. So if I can just play the first video. The first video here on the left-hand side is a gentleman walking on a treadmill. He doesn't have a harness. He's relatively mobile and active. There we go. And we don't need the sound though, if that's okay. And we're just looking at changing his weight distribution and forcing weight shifting. And the reason that we're getting this gentleman to kick the ball in front of him is because that's providing him with an external reference point. It's creating more opportunity for automaticity of gait. And it's also forcing him to increase his stride length, which can be really problematic in Parkinson's. So he's taking some lovely long strides, and then we're asking him to step sideways, and that's very demanding. If you're on a mobile treadmill, you can't stop because you'll end up wrapped around the cross trainer behind you, so you have to shift direction and shift your weight very quickly and rapidly in order to be able to achieve that change of direction. And this is an acceleration of that. So this lady is actually in a harness for safety reasons, and we've increased the speed quite dramatically, and then we've asked her to take 2 steps in any direction and then turn. And so you can see there that's very provocative, very challenging, and then we've translated that into some overground training with obstacles, etc. And that's what we might do in a gait training protocol, etc. And you can see there some of the literature is very strong and very positive for clinical improvements in body weight support treadmill training. Just wanted to have a look at what you can do in addition to exercise. And we've got a lot of people in the clinic that are very interested in photobiomodulation. So I think there's been a few talks on that in this conference. So this was a study where Anne Liebert and colleagues actually looked at doing the PD Warrior approach combined with photobiomodulation. And this was a 3-year case series. And what you can see here in the 7 people over that 3-year period is an improvement in motor and non-motor symptoms. And in Parkinson's, any ability to stay at that plateau is a bit of a victory, but anybody that can improve off that as well is an improvement and a significant one. So you can see here all the green areas where people have improved over that 3-year period. And then in some of the non-motor, just in that one individual C5, there was no response or no positive response in that area there. But again, we're looking at how we can enhance exercise and get the best bang for its buck. And whether it's with low-level light and LED therapy, or if you heard what Laurie Mishley was talking around before with diet, combined is probably going to give us the best approach to help people living well. As you were talking about before, Jeff, how do you live your best days now with Parkinson's? Guaranteed it's going to be with exercise, with your diet and things like photobiomodulation for sure. Just wanted to come back to that study again on PD Warrior, and this was just looking at well-being. And the reason I brought this back was we know that exercise intervention can improve your overall mobility, it can prevent falls, it can enhance your daily activities. Exercise is also an incredible vehicle for building your self-confidence, your belief of self, and overall sense of well-being. And I don't think you can underestimate how powerful that can be in living your best life with Parkinson's. And if we can't find a cure immediately, then living every day as well as possible is really important. So exercise is one of those ways that you can help to really change your perspective and become very empowered in owning the journey for yourself. And so what we were able to show in the 10-week challenge was a statistically significant increase in emotional well-being as well in the PD Warrior program. Now, just to finish up, just a couple of points here again around social prescribing. So exercise is fantastic, but exercise done with a colleague, a buddy, family member, friend is even better, because not only do you get the benefits of the exercise, you also get that social benefit as well. And we know that social isolation is one of the risk factors for increasing the worsening of your symptoms. So if you can combine your exercise and a community or a buddy with you, you're going to get bigger bang for your buck. This was a study conducted by Subramanian and colleagues, and they looked at the risk factors for social isolation being loneliness. And in terms of decreasing your overall well-being, loneliness was a bigger risk factor than things like being overweight, stressed, or even smoking. So if you can create a community around you whilst you're doing your exercise, the benefits will be compounded. So this social prescribing is not a new concept, but it's very, very important. And what we find in the clinic is that people will come for the exercise, but they will stay for the community, because that's what keeps them accountable, keeps them motivated, keeps them engaged. So I just wanted to touch on how important is exercise for you. How much do you feel that you are the driver in your journey? Do you feel that you're just passively taking the medication, or do you feel that you are engaging in the best possible opportunities for you, which is around your exercise? If you had to rate how important exercise was for you at the moment, how would you rate it on a scale of 0 to 10? Just have a think now. How important is exercise for you? And if you're sitting on around a 3, a 4, or a 5, then there's more work to be done. There's more education that may be required to really encourage you to take the next step to get started with your exercise. If you're sitting at about an 8 or a 9 out of 10 and exercise is extremely important to you, then that is fantastic. That's a really good start. But intention doesn't always translate to behaviour. So if you haven't started an exercise program yet, I would strongly encourage you to start doing an exercise program, something that you enjoy, something that meets one of the criteria that we've talked about today. Is it strength training? Is it aerobic exercise? Is it a combination of both? Or is it a skills-based training program? But it's getting started. Just start with 1 rep at a time and then build from there. Thank you very much.